Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be exploring the astrology of April 2026. So I am recording this on the 8th of March 2026. I still have a bit of a cold, just in case I sound, well, if I sound like I have a cold, I do. But it's on its way out now and I'm feeling much better. But when it comes to the rest of the world, the mundane world, it's as someone said, if the US sneezes, then everybody else catches a cold. And that's kind of where we are right now. Of course, as astrologers, we have for at least the last year and probably longer been flagging up. Look, Neptune in Aries is very often associated with war. And yes, there's lots of other great things that this transit can suggest and manifest as, and it can be great for us personally. But then on the world stage, very often we do see the worst expressions, not all the time. Obviously, there's good things happening in the world as well. But it is particularly critical right now, as we've just had this huge conjunction, Saturn-Neptune on the world point, on that 0 degrees of Aries. We knew that there would be something massive happening because we are starting a whole new cycle. And if we're starting a whole new cycle, then what came before naturally must fall away to give space for the new land, the new world to be born. And so we are in that cycle now because the 0 Aries in the northern hemisphere, it's associated with springtime. So it's the beginning of a new season. And when we have changes of season in nature, we have a lot of windy, stormy weather. And that's just like we're experiencing now on the world stage. But it's a little stormier than normal. And certainly the astrology this month is really focused on two things, pretty much. Aries, Aries, Mars, Mars, Aries, Aries, Mars, Mars, Aries, Aries, Mars, Mars. It's just that all the way through. There is a massive stellium going on in Aries. So Aries, the sign where we've just had Saturn conjunct Neptune. Aries ruled by warrior Mars. And I was fascinated that Trump actually called this whole Iran war business Operation Epic Fury. So I'm just going to revisit Aries ruled by Mars. Mars, the red planet. What do we say when we get really angry? Really, really, really angry. I was seeing red. Everything else disappeared. I was just red hot anger. So, Operation Epic Fury, from a man who had the eclipse, the Aquarius eclipse, in his 6th house. So we usually associate 6th house with health. And I talked about health as well. And yes, we know there's something not quite right with his health. Even just with the latest photo of the thing that's on his neck and all this kind of stuff. But he is the president of the United States, and therefore we could read his chart with mundane meanings in mind. And the 6th house in mundane astrology is associated with the services. If you think of your own natal chart, 6th house is how can I serve, the daily work that you do, the skills that you have, your routines. But on a mundane level, it's the services that work for us, including the military. So military service, we call it military service. So there was the eclipse opposing his own natal Mars in the 12th house, very close to his ascendant. So the eclipse activated his Mars 12th house, which is kind of, let's do a sneaky attack. Let's do an attack from the behind. Let's do an attack that nobody else will see coming. Well, we kind of all saw it coming because we're astrologers. And because Mars As I said, and I know other astrologers said as well, Mars by transit was coming up to activate that eclipse degree on March the 1st. He attacked Iran less than 24 hours before Mars hit that degree. So on the 28th of February. So we've got the Operation Epic Fury triggered by an eclipse that connects with the military, that connects with the ruler of Aries, Mars. Remember, Aries is symbolized by the ram, and we could say, yes, it's a sheep. But we could also think about why we call it the ram and why we call things a battering ram. If you see a ram fighting with another ram when they're battering each other with their horns. So we can see that sense of ramming ahead with something. There's a pushiness that can come from Aries and, of course, Mars. And the symbolism goes on, because, of course, Neptune is now in Aries. And Mars is currently in Pisces, Neptune's sign. So these two are having quite a dialogue with one another because they're in what we call mutual reception. Neptune is in Mars's sign and Mars is in Neptune's sign. And apparently Trump named the bombs that are kind of been taken over to Iran or sent to Iran, he's named them after US sailors. I mean, how much more Neptune in Aries can we get? Or Mars in Pisces, for that matter. And then finally, like the astrological cherry on the cake, is this picture circulating with all Trump's cronies around him praying over him. I mean, it's absolutely Neptune in Aries. I talked before about how Neptune in Aries could see the rise of kind of false prophets or false leaders. There's the positive spiritual leaders, those who truly lead from the soul, such as the monks who were walking. But we've also now got this situation with a false leader, not forgetting, of course, the fact that much of this war, perhaps all of this war, is much less about saving, noting Neptune is associated with saving people, is much less about the promoted idea that, oh, we're saving the Iranian people from this bad man at the top. And much more about quick, let's get the papers distracted from the Epstein files. So we're really beginning to see how Neptune in Aries is speaking incredibly loudly through all of these actions, that Trump is taking. It's quite extraordinary. Obviously, other words I could use is horrifying, terrifying, scary. And yes, of course, I'm worried. We're all worried. It should go without saying, but I am going to say it just to be very clear. The astrology I can be fascinated with, but at the same time, of course, my stomach lurches when I see, oh my God, he's actually gone and done it. That's the human part of me. But I also would like to trust the unfolding astrology in that there are other things unfolding behind all of this. And that even if he does his worst, then there's going to still be a future. There's going to still be a world. We'll still be here. We'll still be doing our own fight for a better world, a better future. And if nothing else, I was thinking the other day, watching some kids go past, the youth of today, which is very important when we talk about Aries themes. Aries is youthful. It speaks of youth particularly. These are the people that in the future will be in power, and they are getting one big story about how not to do things, how not to lead a world, how not to act. So I'm hoping that the future generation will take this on board as an example of how not to do things, and therefore will just do it better than we did. So as we come into the month, I'm just going to point out that our Pisces house and our Aries house, right at the beginning, these are the areas of the chart that are super activated. Pisces has the North Node, of course, Vesta, Mercury, Pallas, and Mars there. And then Aries has Neptune, Saturn, the Sun, Eris, and Chiron there. And the first aspect of the month is actually the full moon, which of course is going to activate all the Aries stuff that's going on, because the moon at 12 degrees and 21 minutes of Libra is going to oppose the sun at the same degrees of Aries. So immediately we have some kind of story that says what's really in focus right now is trying to level the playing field. It's trying to work together and ultimately trying to find peace and work together as partners. This is the moon in Libra. The moon in Libra does not want everybody fighting Aries. The moon in Libra needs to feel like everybody is on side and that we're all being treated fairly and equally. So clearly we come into the month with this desire for getting some equilibrium, some cool heads would really, really help, says the moon in Libra. Just going to remind you as well that Mercury is now in direct motion, but it's still just paddling through these last degrees of the shadow zone. It'll be out of the shadow zone on the 9th of April. So thinking is still a little bit unclear. And so that is kind of playing into the background story here. Now, on the 6th of April, Uranus will become anaretic. It'll move on to the final degree of Taurus. I actually meant to mention this at the beginning as well, but I got very distracted with talking about what's going on with all the Aries stuff, Neptune and Aries and so on. But Uranus is going to be changing signs this month. So that's the other big story, the Aries stellium and Uranus changing signs. But before Uranus changes sign, he is going to sit on this 29 degrees of Taurus. And that is super important, particularly in the current atmosphere. So 29 Taurus, okay, so that's just an anaretic degree. It's a critical degree. We already know that Uranus in Taurus has been trying to get us unstuck because Taurus tends to be very stuck in the mud. So he's been trying to get us unstuck to free up resources, to teach us something about our values, to reinvent what is most important to us, to help us to change things, to revolutionize things here, and to create a better kind of financial system, upgrade our financial systems. So digital money, that all came in as well. So Uranus has been very hard at work here with the idea of awakening us to the potential of greater freedom when it comes to our resources. But in practice, it's also manifested as often feeling like things are very destabilized, particularly in the banking and stocks and shares and all that kind of thing, the markets, the digital markets, everything feels very unstable. And of course, when war kicks off, well, two things happen. One is that the markets become very unstable and then the price of oil goes up and everybody panics because headlines are saying, oh my God, the cost of living is going to go up even more. What a surprise that the people are paying for the billionaires' wars, but that's another story. So everything becomes very, very unstable. And then Mars is actually going to activate that on the 8th of April. So Mars will come in and form a sextile to Uranus. Normally that's a helpful influence, but Mars is at the very end of Pisces, 29 Pisces, where everything is completely like, you can imagine like a whirlpool of water, and the warrior is going round and round and round, and he's trying to reach out to Uranus there at 29 Taurus. And yes, there's an opportunity to do something different, to climb out of this hole. But at the same time, things feel a little rocky. And 29 Taurus is also associated with the weeping sisters of the Pleiades. And so sometimes it can be a bit more of an acute degree because of this association. And so we get obviously the idea of weeping, upset, sadness. There's something that's gone wrong here. It's a little different in personal practice, so don't panic if you have something at 29 Taurus. There's other things we can talk about, but in the context of collective astrology, my sense is that things are becoming a little destabilized for a while whilst Uranus is on this final degree. And it's very hard to predict because that's the point with Uranus. It's unpredictable. So we've got unpredictable issues around our resources. Don't forget that Iran has said that as a consequence of the conflict, they may target US and Israeli boats that are going through the Strait of, I think it's pronounced Hormuz. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. I should have listened to that before I did this. But anyway, the Strait of Hormuz. So basically, it's a shipping lane that's incredibly important. And if things start to get kind of blocked there for any reason, then that has a knock-on effect. So we can see that Uranus going on to that final degree of Taurus has the potential to cause a lot of destabilization. In our own personal charts, Uranus is just saying, hurry up. You need to free yourself from something here that has been holding you back. And it might just be a thought, a feeling. Remember, this could be about insecurities inside your emotional life. What is holding me back from trying something new here? What is holding me back from doing something different here? What's holding me back from shaking things up here? That's what Uranus would like us to ask for our own personal lives. But the outer world, yes, there's other destabilization. And again, I'm just kind of struck by the idea of how the rich have caused a destabilization in all the things that we've taken for granted. And I do know, by the way, it's not all rich people, but the kind of super rich. We're talking like the top 1%, maybe even like top 0.5%, who have caused these massive issues that now feel like they're a very threat to our survival. So Taurus can speak about just the idea of surviving in this world. So there's maybe some shocking or surprising actions with Mars sextile to Uranus that bring in a little bit of a sense of anxiety, perhaps. And then Mars goes into Aries, where he's most happy. Mars goes into Aries on the 9th of April. And of course, runs straight into Neptune, that's on the 13th of April, and Saturn on the 19th of April. Just pulling back a little, Mars going into Aries, of course, is going to cross that world point, so it will activate the potential of Saturn conjunct Neptune. So it's very important just to watch what's going on around this time, because that's going to animate our own charts, our own potential that Saturn Neptune seeded. So just pay attention. I'll give you a little example. The day that Saturn joined Neptune in my chart, it was actually in my 8th house, but Aries is on the cusp of my 9th house, and I actually have an Aries stellium. So this year is going to be very interesting. Anyway, so I have Aries on the cusp of my 9th house, which is to do with long distance travel, amongst many other things. And a friend of mine, completely sort of just out of the blue, sent me a message saying, hey, why don't you come up to mine, in a couple of weeks? Now, I couldn't do it at that particular point, but why don't you come up to mine? And she lives quite a way away. And I was thinking, oh, how interesting. It was like a little tiny hint that in this next period of Saturn in Aries, in my chart, as part of my own Saturn return, other things going on there as well, I am being encouraged to kind of get out of my comfort zone, travel further, go further than I've gone before. So that could be read metaphorically as well as literally. So traveling, getting out of my comfort zone and going further away. So these little things that happen can actually give us a really good heads up as to what's going to happen in our lives, or what the planets are just asking us to do. So, rather than sort of constantly thinking about what's going to happen to me, or in this case, what's going to happen to us, it's like, how can we work with this? What can I do with this? Because we're not kind of just puppets of the gods, although sometimes I know it kind of feels like it. So Mars goes into Aries, and this is where he gets all heated up. Of course, the positive side is Mars in Aries is bold, it's courageous, it's let's do this, you can do it, let's go. And so we're all getting an injection of that kind of energy. But Mars conjunct Neptune, that could bring in some potential for misdirected anger or misdirected attacks. It could be, almost like trying to gaslight. There's lots of confusion that comes with Mars conjunct Neptune. Positively, Mars conjunct Neptune can speak about acting on one's intuition and taking action again to save others. Neptune is a very kind of Christ-like figure, sort of consciousness, but it's also very hazy. And so there's a haze that seems to descend as Mars goes into Aries, and we're not quite sure of who we're fighting, what we're fighting for, and it's a little all over the place until Mars gets clear of Neptune. 15th of April, Mercury is not far behind. It enters Aries on this date. Of course, this is important because we've had this long retrograde through Pisces, or it probably felt like it was longer than normal. It wasn't any longer than normal. But now Mercury is clear of Pisces, moving into Aries. And just look at this chart. I've moved it to the point where the moon has also just moved into Aries. So the moon and Mercury on that world point, again, activating Saturn conjunct Neptune, then Mars, then Saturn. We've got Eris there, the sun there, Chiron there. I mean, this is just huge amount of Aries energy. So yes, our Aries house and our own personal chart is super charged. Generally, Mercury going into Aries again speaks of being more direct. That's what Aries is about. It's lit up, it's on fire. Let's go, let's do this. Decision made. I don't want to talk about it, I just want to do it. That is Mercury. It's very hot-headed. It can be a little selfish in the way that it thinks, but proactive thinking is very good for Mercury in Aries. And this decisiveness, after all the wishy-washy from Mercury in Pisces, I imagine that might be quite welcome. But again, we have that fighting talk with Mercury in Aries, and we've already got Mars battering it out with Saturn with the impending conjunction. That'll be on the 19th. So we've got a lot of just heat coming from all these planets. The sun's going to conjoin Eris and Chiron, so that's the waning conjunction between those two. So we've got activation of troublemakers with Eris, but also truth tellers with Eris. So there's inconvenient truths. There's the potential for bridge building with Chiron, but there's also, of course, the potential for wounding. We've also then got Mars sextile to Pluto. So that's on the 16th of April, whilst it's all caught up in all of this Aries stuff. So now we're trying to take action. Mars, that's swift, quick, but feeling frustrated because of Saturn. And we want to change things. Pluto, we want to take some kind of direct action with Pluto to eradicate a problem. So that's personally, but also on the world stage as well. So generally, Mars sextile to Pluto can be quite positive because, again, it makes us super brave. It encourages us to focus. This is the target. This is what we're doing. And we can transform this situation if we just focus and take the right action. But with all that heat, it's difficult to tell whether on the wider scale there will be any kind of forethought that Saturn would hopefully want to give us. We need to have a bit of think before you act, but that's really hard under these energies. And then we have the new moon in Aries. So as you can see from this chart, it's just an Aries explosion at 27 degrees and 28 minutes of the sign Aries. It's conjunct Chiron closely, pretty close to Eris there as well. So it's bringing in that story of Chiron conjunct Eris. I talked about this in a previous post on Substack, that this particular aspect has been talking about, screaming about patriarchy, the problems with patriarchy, the problems with the male wound, the issues we have with anger and how we take action in society and how women are not listened to. Just mentioned again, it's the asteroid Okiurori was conjunct Chiron and Eris at the last conjunction between the two of them, and Okiurori was Chiron's daughter, and she could foresee what was going to happen to her father because she was a prophetess, a seer, and she told her father his fates and was immediately punished by the gods and turned into a horse. In other words, she was silenced. And so there's a whole big story here with Chiron conjunct Eris, the wounding that happens, the pain that happens when we don't listen and take action on the truth, and instead we silence usually the women. So this is a big story. Of course, we've seen it happening in the wider world. We can see it happening here. There are some other interpretations that we can also work with. It's not the only thing, but I think it's the most pertinent thing at this particular point in time. And then we have this new moon activating or reactivating this story. And the moon is in a very wide square to Pluto. It's an out of sign connection, but it is there just on the edges of the orbs that I use, but it is there. So of course Pluto can intensify things and make somebody want to force the point. So that's the thing that we just need to watch. And then on the 19th of April, Mars will conjoin Saturn and we start to move into this period right on my birthday on the 20th of April, where Mercury will conjoin Mars and Saturn. The three of them are just sat together. So I'm going to have an interesting solar return this year. So Mercury, Saturn and Mars all joined together. Positively, this would be great for, I have an idea, Mercury. I'm going to communicate it. I'm going to talk about it, Mercury. I'm going to be brave, Mars, and in Aries. I'm going to take action on it, Mars. I'm going to start it, Mars. And I'm going to keep going until I finish it, Saturn. So this kind of energy can be really, really useful. The conjunction is happening at 7 degrees of Aries. So locate that position in your chart and have a think about what ideas do I have here? What kinds of conversations am I having here? What do I want to begin here? And I'd love to complete my objective here. So Saturn is the completion, Mars is the beginning and the initiation of things. So yes, there's some really positive stuff that can come from this little trio. But this little trio, it actually makes me think, is it 3 people on the world stage? This little trio getting together can also get very stuck and at loggerheads with one another, because everybody's trying to talk at once. Everybody wants to be heard. Mercury and Aries, it's like, listen to me. And then we've got the frustration of Mars conjunct Saturn because things have slowed down, or, the objective hasn't been reached yet. There's something going on with these 3 being intensely caught up together. And then the sun moves into Taurus, still on the 20th of April. So this starts to spotlight the Taurus season, of course. So again, we're now talking about slowing down. The sun brings a focus on, we need to slow down here. Yes, there's still all the Aries stuff happening, but we need to slow down a little. And it's kind of interesting as the sun goes into Taurus. Of course, Uranus is still hanging out on 29 Taurus, the beginning and the ending of something that's connected with our resources, with our finances, with our things that we think of as precious, with our values, with our security issues. Something is being illuminated here. Maybe we can see, personally, we can see what needs to change and actually starting to feel a little more comfortable. The sun is the self, so we're trying to embody this change. But mostly we're getting this, we need to slow down. Venus then moves into Gemini, so she's already whipped her way through her own sign, Taurus, moves into Gemini on the 24th of April, and that brings in a different energy around our relationships. And it speaks of course, division sometimes. The heart is divided in Gemini, or we could say that Venus in Gemini is quite capable of loving many people. And she wants to bring love to the many. Gemini is about multiples of things. And of course, the idea of communicating love, communicating in loving and kind ways. Maybe this will help to facilitate some kind of diplomacy, because Venus also rules Libra as well as Taurus. So this might be helpful. And then Pallas Athena enters Aries. So we're still really focused on this. And this is an interesting transit because it's actually going to be right up until the 8th of March 2027, because Pallas is going to have a long retrograde through this sign. We'll talk about that more when we come to it. It's going to begin on the 14th of August at 22 degrees and 38 minutes of Aries. So Pallas has got a way to go in forward motion first, but she's going to be in our Aries house almost a year, just under a year. So Pallas Athena is the sister of Mars, also sister of Eris. And she's the cool-headed one, mostly. She is the cool-headed one. She is the one who decides to talk about it rather than fight about it. She is intelligence, creative intelligence. She is associated with problem solving and strategizing. So I kind of feel like she's going to be really helpful here, particularly whilst all this ruckus is going on with Mars being here, because Pallas is trying to help. She's saying we need to maybe change the strategy. The strategy needs to be more direct with Aries. The strategy needs to be more proactive. We need to be more proactive about solving the conflict, says Pallas in Aries. And then we end the month with another major movement, which is Uranus entering Gemini. So this is on the 26th of April, 2026. And this is for the long term, for about 7 years. We already have had a preview of this, of course, back in 2025. But now Uranus is here for the duration. And where Uranus moves, his objective is to get us to change, to upgrade, to awaken, to revolutionize, to revamp, to reinvent, to innovate. He brings this kind of energy into our Gemini house and says, hey, again, shaking things up. Things need to change here. You've got too stuck here. You're too set in your ways here. Let's do something different. And so this radical energy comes into play that is changing primarily the way that we think and communicate, mind and communication, Gemini. It's also associated sort of in the mundane world with our transport systems, like local transport systems. It's also connected with schooling as well, schooling and teaching, particularly children, primarily children, particularly with all the Aries stuff that's going on. So again, the youth of today seems to be flagged and figured by these transits. But Uranus going into Gemini, one of the big things that I have spoken about before primarily is about AI technology, especially with Pluto in Aquarius. Uranus and Pluto will be forming trines with one another. So they're sort of working together. They're also going to be connecting with Neptune and Aries as well. So we've got the talent triangle ongoing. And so it kind of feels like the revolution in our communications, the way we connect, the way we think, is going to completely transform society. That's the story of Uranus and Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius. It might even change our politics, maybe, with Pluto in Aquarius. One of the things I spoke about is Uranus in Gemini. Gemini is an air sign, so we might have strange, unusual things in the sky. We had that also with Pluto going into Aquarius. We had lots of signs foreshadowing things going on in the skies that were a bit kind of weird at the time. And who knows, maybe that stuff about the aliens that Trump talked about telling, that might come out as Uranus goes into Gemini. This speaks of alien language. I've nicknamed Uranus in Gemini the ET phone home transit, because that's what it feels like. Uranus is something that is unintelligible. It speaks of higher mind. This is why I'm thinking about computing, the explosion of AI. And even recently, we've had stories about how AI are creating their own language. AI agents talking to one another, they realize that they are both AI agents. And so they start to communicate in this language that we can't understand. So that's very Uranus in Gemini. And if we can't understand the computers as they talk to one another, then we don't know what they're talking about and what they're doing. So that's going to be an interesting one. But we do have this supercharged energy coming into play with Uranus in Gemini. And that could also bring, a lot of changes to our media as well, because Gemini is communications, and it often speaks of the newspapers and journalism and how news is handled. Now, obviously, one of the things that we have noticed is that the news and social media can very easily manipulate the population to vote or think in certain ways. And this is becoming more and more and more obvious. So I imagine that Uranus trine to Pluto, Uranus in Gemini, is going to force us to deal with this, to look at this. How could we change this? How could we stop this from happening? So there's going to be a lot of stuff going on here. There's already big discussions about whether under 16s should be able to access social media. So there's limitations in place there. I imagine we will start to see an uptick in the changes in social media, which will ripple out and again change society. And in our own personal lives, wherever Gemini is in your charts, it's time just to think about, what do I want to free myself from here? What would I do here if I was completely free? If I was liberated from the burdens or the ties that bind, what would I do here? What changes would I love to implement? How can I modernize this area of my life? Where does it feel tired and a bit stuck? Uranus will just help you to bring this all up to date, to progress. Uranus is about progress and progressing through life in a way that we are constantly shifting and changing and adapting. Don't forget, Gemini is super, super adaptable. So with a shift in thinking, we can adapt. And maybe that is the key. Uranus is helping us out here this whole new world that's being seeded by Saturn and Neptune, to be able to deal with it, to cope with it, to work with it, to live it, we need to change the way that we think. Maybe to bring about this better world, this vision, Neptune, of a world that is stable, based on wise leadership. For that to happen, we need to change how we think, Uranus in Gemini. This brings me to the end of this reading for April 2026. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. Maybe leave a comment. How are you doing in these changing times? If you'd like to hear more from me, I do have a Substack where for members, I do a weekly forecast. I also do lunation readings as well. But there's also free articles to read on there. Lots and lots of stuff available for everybody. I have a website. There's also lots of articles on there as well. All the links are below. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.